Greetings, Jeepers. I'm going to show you how to install your leaf springs on your 1947 CJ to a Willys Jeep and all the tricks and trades on how to properly align your leaf springs with your pivot eye bolt bracket and your shackle bracket, how to get your pivot bolt in there, how we get the right height, and how we roll the axle and leaf springs assembly into and under the Jeep in the front. On the passenger side of the Jeep, I'm going to go through all the various components for this installation. Here we have the pivot eye bolt. This is your greasable bolt. It has a zerk so we can get grease in there. And this bolt will be pushed and threaded all the way through your pivot eye bolt leaf spring bracket. It'll just be pushed right through, and make sure you have the bushing, your pivot eye bushing on the rear. And once you get your pivot eye bolt right through your leaf spring pivot eye bolt bracket and right through the leaf spring with your bushing, then we'll also have to install on the back side your lock washer, then your nut, and then we'll put a cotter pin through the hole on this bolt to secure. While on the front, this right here is the right hand threaded shackle. This means both threads are right hand, and in terms I mean by each thread is right hand thread. So to tighten it is normal, turn to the right. This right hand shackle will be installed on your front leaf spring bracket or your shackle threaded bracket. This will thread directly into this bracket, and the other part will thread directly into your leaf spring. Please note there's no bushing on this side. And your shackle will be installed with the C, you could say, pointing inwards. Now on the driver's side, and going through all the different components, all these components are pretty much exactly the same. The pivot eye bolt setup is exactly the same as the passenger side, but the only main difference is your shackle. This is your left-hand shackle. So one thread is right hand and one thread is left hand. In other words, I mean this thread is right hand thread. You can see it's threading down, but this thread is left hand thread. So you have to spin the opposite direction to thread. The left hand shackle will be installed similarly to the passenger side, but there's only one main difference. The right hand thread will thread directly into your threaded shackle leaf spring bracket, and your left hand will thread directly into your leaf spring. And note there is no bushing on this side of the leaf spring, and the shackle will be installed with the C facing inwards. Now I'm going to show you how we got the Dana 25 axle and leaf spring assembly slid in underneath the Jeep from the front. And how we did this is actually very simple. We have a creeper placed on the floor. We have the creeper placed horizontal under the Jeep going this direction. And on top of that, we put a 2x10 running across the creeper on the frame on each side. And then on top of that, we put a 2x4. And with this thickness, with your 2x10 and 2x4, and it's directly placed on top of your U-bolts where your leaf spring mounts to your Dana 25 axle, this actually brings you to the right height to install your pivot eye bolts on the rear of your leaf spring. The first step is to install your leaf spring pivot eye bolt. This bolt will be installed so your greasable zerk will be facing outwards and your nut will be tightened on the inside. And to install this, your pivot eye bolt will be installed in your pivot eye leaf spring mounting bracket, and it will be installed, inserted through the hole, and then we'll have to push the front of the leaf spring down, and that will align our bushing up. Just like that, and now we can move to the other side. The driver's side is the exact same process. You install your leaf spring pivot eye bolt right through the holes, and we'll get everything lined up. The driver's side is the exact same way. Install your pivot eye bolt right through the bracket and right through the bushing on the leaf spring. Let's go. Ensure you install both pivot eye bolts on the driver and passenger side. This will ensure that your leaf spring is all square, and we will now tighten the nut on the back side. The next step is we have to sink our pivot eye bolt right into our pivot eye bolt bracket. As you can see, there's little teeth on the pivot eye bolt. This right here is actually going to drive into your bracket and make little grooves so your bolt doesn't spin. And we'll just have to use a breaker bar and tighten this nut without a lock washer on, and that will force these teeth into this bracket. And in our case, there's the exhaust pipe, and I'll show you a little trick on how we got a homemade breaker bar set up.
So you're aware that's your conventional good old-fashioned breaker bar. So with the limited space, we just have a smaller socket, and then we cut ourselves a heavy-duty piece of pipe and slid it on the ratchet, and now you can get into that space with a homemade breaker bar. Works like a dam.
Using our homemade breaker bar, as you can see, the exhaust pipe is in the way, and we'll now just tighten that nut on the back as so. It's kind of hard to, but it will go, and those teeth will sink, and I'll show you when we have the teeth all the way sunk in. After tightening the nut with your breaker bar, you can see the teeth on our pivot eye bolt have fully sunk in to our pivot eye bolt bracket. Now the bolt will not spin on us, and we now can secure the lock washer and cotter pin on the back to fully secure our bolt. Once the teeth are fully set into your bracket, now we can unloosen this bolt, and then we'll put in our lock washer behind this and the cotter pin through the hole on the pivot eye bolt. Install your lock washer onto the threaded side, put it on, and now we'll put the nut back on. We'll tighten the nut until it compresses the lock washer, and then we'll put our cotter pin in. Now with a torque wrench, torque your pivot eye bolt to 30 foot-pounds, and that'll be enough to compress your lock washer. And then we'll stick a cotter pin right through this small hole on your pivot eye bolt to secure your bolt. Install your cotter pin through the hole on the bolt, just pushing it all the way through, and then we'll bend both sides to secure. Install your cotter pin so it pushes all the way into the groove on your nut. And now we'll just bend both sides to secure. And just like that, the cotter pin is bent and your pivot eye bolt is secured. It's the same step for your other side. We had to readjust the system on how the Jeep was jacked. As you can see, we had to get it in line, so we get our shackle bracket now in line. And to do so, we put jack stands on the front bumper instead of it being back there. And now we also have a bottle jack right below our axle. And when we pumped our jack, that will raise the whole axle and leaf spring assembly. And then this will close the gap here and make this closer so we can get our shackle through both these holes. I'm just showing you the purpose of the jacking. As you can see, the shackle will not fit through both these holes. So we have to now jack up the axle so it'll fit through those two holes. Use the bottle jack to now lift up the axle, and that will close the gap so we can slide in the shackle. The top thread is your right hand thread, and the bottom one is your left hand thread. And there we go. It is now in, and now we can install the bushings on the other side.
So now we're going to put on our shackle bushings. You might want to take off the zerk and put it on later once you get it installed so they just don't get banged up. So the top is the right hand bushing, so you just thread that in to the C-shackle. Similarly, take your bottom bushing, take the zerk off, and get it started on the bottom of the C-shackle in a left hand tightening thread.
What we're going to do is tighten the two bushings at the same rate. So we've got two ratchets on, and we'll go together. At the very end, we're going to do one at a time just to seat the threads all the way in until it maxes out. The threads on the shackle bushing are now bottomed out on your left hand thread, which is the bottom, and your right hand thread, which is the top. The final step is to insert the zerks onto each of your bushings. The final step is to tighten our zerks with the wrench. We'll get it just snug with the wrench, and there you go. That is the driver's side. Now on the passenger side, the main difference, this shackle is two right-hand threads. Now we'll just insert it into the holes. You may need to readjust your bottle jack that's on the axle so we can get these two threads perfectly centered in each hole. And we'll install each right-hand bushing. And this is the same steps as the other side. And we'll show you the final product when it's done. Fast forward here, and the passenger side shackle is fully installed. This is your right-hand shackle, the two right-hand threads, with the threads fully bottomed out, and the grease zerks fully installed. And to show you that our axle is now floating and it's secure, we can take out our supports, and you can see it's now floating. But we do have a bottle jack back there supported, because we do have to torque our axle U-bolts to our leaf springs to 50 foot-pounds. With all 8 of your 7/16 U-bolts now torqued to 50 foot-pounds, we can remove the ball jack. And the point of having the ball jack supporting the axle was so it lifted the weight of your Dana 25 axle up. And that meant there was no weight on your leaf springs. So your leaf spring could be sucked up and make a good contact with your axle when you torqued your U-bolts. When your leaf springs are fully installed and everything torqued to spec, I would then support your Jeep by putting jack stands right underneath the axle, just so you don't stretch out the new leaf springs that you just installed on both sides.
That's it. Subscribe.